Hi everyone, this is Dawn Van Dam and it's the top of the hour, so we will get our webinar underway. Thank you very much for attending today's session. I am the president of 1 Million Solutions in Health, and I'm extremely pleased today to be moderating this webinar about the adoption process of novel technologies in drug safety, some of the challenges and solutions, and our panelists today will be fundamentally creating and recommending a roadmap for the industry as we move forward in this area of drug safety and toxicology. And I'll get to introductions about them in just a few moments. But let me first give you all an overview of today's webinar session. Today we have both Yvonne Will and Helen McBride, who are leaders in the industry in drug safety in the biopharmaceutical industry, and they're going to be discussing the changing landscape and how a key building block of successful drug discovery, the toxicology program, has evolved over the years. They're going to lay out a plan as to what should be evaluated and validated in preclinical safety over the next 5 years. This discussion is brought to you today by the Technology Evaluation Consortium, which is part of 1 Million Solutions in Health, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about that in just a few moments. So again, thank you all for attending, and I'm going to start to give you some of the background information, and then we'll get into a very lively and informative discussion from both Yvonne and Helen. So at 1 Million Solutions in Health, our goal is to improve healthcare one solution at a time. And we're looking at doing that in the areas of life sciences, in healthcare, and with patients and consumers. And really the fundamental thing that we're trying to achieve is to shape healthcare by sharing solutions around the world. So we're very excited with that mandate, of course. How we do that is we help connect people. We help them learn and share, and we also help innovate and collaborate. And it is through collaboration that we fundamentally help people move forward and help them be successful with various projects. So let me tell you a little bit about the Technology Evaluation Consortium. And really, fundamentally, it is a collaborative partnership within the pharmaceutical and biotech industry and other stakeholders. So those stakeholders would be organizations like vendors and the vendor community. So we work with the technology vendors on the one side. We work with the pharmaceutical and biotech industry on the other side. And we are basically the conduits in the middle, the Technology Evaluation Consortium, sort of like the honest broker managing projects, managing the evaluations, managing the validations, and making sure that everything is done in a scientific way as we move forward. One thing to think about, I know this slide is really busy, but it really just talks about the fact that this is actually a report that came out from an organization called JLL, and it's called their Life Sciences Cluster Report, and it was issued in 2014. And what they are saying here is that there's a number of cities that we all should be watching because they're really doing tons and tons more biotech work and pharmaceutical development and scientific discovery. And it's fundamentally because of all the recession problems that we've had over the last number of years. A number of economies have decided that healthcare and life sciences and the biotech industry are stable economies or stable ways of running business. And so what they did was they decided to put in, incubators and startup companies and kind of like innovation areas in all these different cities to attract talented people. But it means that there's more and more science happening around the world, and there's more and more things that are going on. And so in order to coordinate all that and to kind of make sure that the best science gets brought forward in the quickest way and gets forward and is used in the fastest way, I think that's a key issue that we're going to be looking at over the next while. So at 1 Million Solutions in Health, and we've taken over the Technology Evaluation Consortium, which has actually been around for over 10 years. And here I'm just highlighting some of the people who have been part of the growth and the development and the implementation of this Technology Evaluation Consortium, particularly in the area of drug safety, over these last 10 years. So we're very pleased to have had these people join us and be part of us throughout our history, and we're looking forward to engaging with many more people over the next while. So I have actually 2 pages of people who have been involved, as I said, over the years, besides, of course, our 2 speakers for today, Yvonne and Helen from both Pfizer and Amgen. So thank you to everyone who might be listening today. And if your picture is here, great. We found you on LinkedIn. If your picture is not here and you've been involved, there's been tons and tons of people, which I'll share with you in a few moments, but just wanted to highlight some of those people along the way. So how do we work in the Technology Evaluation Consortium? Our process is really pretty simple. We help find new scientific solutions. Those either come to us or we seek them out. We disseminate the science and gather input to optimize it. And that's really what the consortium's role is optimizing that technology. And we either do it through an evaluation process, which is called our Signature Square, where we help work with subject matter experts in order to do that evaluation, or we actually have a full-fledged more large-scale validation project where we go through a process of validating that technology in a real-world environment. And then across the board, we share the findings with the 1 Million Solutions in Health community in order to help accelerate the adoption and utilization of this science. Here's just a partial list of some of the technology projects that we've done over the years, and we'd be more than happy to tell you more about those at another time when we have more time. Also, because of our 10-year history, we put together a graph recently of our progress over the years. There was a bit of a lull, you can see there, around the recession when it was harder for people to be participants. But now we're on a strong upward curve of doing numerous technology evaluations every single year. And as you'll hear in a moment, we have plans and the methodologies in place to actually accelerate this even more exponentially over the next while. Some of our statistics in 2013 and 2014, if we look at those put together, we had an average of almost 8 pharmaceutical companies or biopharmaceutical companies being involved in each project that we worked on. We had on average over 20 subject matter experts involved in some capacity with each project, each evaluation or validation. And altogether, we had over 100 industry experts from those companies who participated in the consortium projects. 40% of those were at the management level and 60% were frontline research and scientists. And over time, there have been up to 14 pharmaceutical companies involved with any one particular project and never less than 4 companies involved. And over the years, we've worked with 30+ pharmaceutical companies and 15+ universities. The length of a TEC project is usually about 6 months or less. So I think really great statistics that we're proud of. Recently, we did an open call trying to get submissions from around the world of new technology. And here's just a distribution of where all those new technologies came from across the world, around the world. 2/3 of those from academia, 1/3 from small businesses. And just taking a look at what those technologies are. So we took that list of about 100 submissions. We brought it down to about 20 that we've shared with the consortium steering committee membership. And here's just a highlight of about 6 or 7 of them, so you can see some of the work that we have in our plans for 2015 and 2016. So again, as you can see, we have a nice aggressive movement forward to lots of new technologies. The last thing I just wanted to highlight very, very quickly, and then I'll introduce our speakers for today, is we have a first-of-its-kind brand new partnership with the National Institute of Health and its Institutes of Health and its 26 divisions. And through the Office of Technology Transfer, we have a partnership agreement with the NIH to bring forward their licensed inventions and biological materials, both from the NIH and through new science through the FDA, and bring it forward through the consortium for evaluation. So the opportunity here is to bring even more new technologies, have closed-door webinars with our Technology Evaluation Consortium members, and really put this team of people in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry at the forefront of knowing what's happening first and then being able to utilize it in a quick way to move forward. So why is the NIH happy about this, and why is the industry happy about this? Well, for the industry, it gives a view into the work happening at the NIH. It gives you a chance to see the roadmap to conduct some Q&A. We triage all opportunities, so you're not going to be seeing millions of them, but just the best ones. And the NIH is looking for tons and tons of feedback to expand their Rolodex through the consortium and get value out of the science that is being developed and patented at the NIH and being funded by the taxpayers. So all in all, we look for that to be a win-win for all participants, including more technology adoption and making that curve going up even faster than it was before. So with no further ado, and to give you after that background from the Technology Evaluation Consortium and what it's all about, I'm going to introduce our two speakers, and then we're going to hear from them about some ideas for the future and how we can be more successful all around. So Dr. Yvonne Will, she was born and raised in Germany, where she conducted her undergraduate studies in human nutrition at the University of Bonn. In 1992, she conducted an internship at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Oregon State University, where she enrolled the same year to obtain her Master's of Science degree. She obtained her PhD in biochemistry and biophysics from Oregon State University, and during that time, she was involved in drug discovery as well. Until about 2007, she was a group leader in drug safety at Pfizer La Jolla, and during that time, she also held an adjunct faculty position at San Diego State University in the toxicology program, where she conducted lectures, taught lab courses, and mentored mentored students. In the fall of 2007, Dr. Will was transferred to Pfizer Groton, Connecticut to lead a group of scientists in the Compound Safety Prediction Group within medicinal chemistry. She's published a book on drug-induced mitochondrial toxicity and is currently working on a new book on drug discovery toxicology. She's given many national and international lectures, conducted workshops and seminars, and continues to publish numerous papers each year in peer-reviewed journals. In 2012, she was honored with the Connecticut Technology Council's Women Research Innovation and Leadership Award, and just this past September, she became head of science and technology for drug safety within Pfizer. So great. We're really, really pleased to have Yvonne with us today. Additionally, we're also very excited to have Helen McBride with us today. Dr. Helen McBride has been at Amgen since 2006. She received her Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from Texas A&M University and her PhD in Oncological Sciences from the University of Utah. Her postdoctoral work was conducted at Caltech, where she stayed on as a senior research fellow prior to joining Amgen. At Amgen, she was a discovery team lead in inflammation research prior to joining Discovery Toxicology in 2012, where she focused on safety-related imaging and enhancing the suite of cell biology assays for predictive and investigational toxicology. In 2015, she gained a new role identifying and optimizing academic collaborations, as well as identifying partnering opportunities with both internal Amgen Shanghai and external resources for in vitro assays and new technologies. So with no further ado, we're going to turn it over to our panelists today and begin to pick their brains about where they think things have been, where they're going, and setting out that roadmap for the future. So here's our agenda, and we're going to just jump in today and turn it over to Yvonne and Helen and give us their thoughts. So the first question today for both Yvonne and Helen is, can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of technology evaluations? And maybe what I'll do first is I'll start with Yvonne, if you want to jump in and give us your thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to Helen.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Dawn, also for the kind introduction. Now everybody online can guess how old I really am. So not just kidding. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to talk about technology evaluation. It's really one of my passions. Yeah, and I'm very fortunate that, you know, I now actually get paid to lead a science and technology strategy here at Pfizer. So how did it start? For me personally, it was shortly after my arrival at drug safety in Pfizer in 2003 that I was offered to you know, basically join what was, you know, called the Science and Technology Pfizer Consortia at that point. And interesting enough, there is really a true evolution to it, because back then, besides the lead, who was Denise Robinson-Govat at that time, somebody who I very much admire, At that time, it was really an assortment of very enthusiastic, brilliant scientists out of, several different disciplines and from different sides within Pfizer. And basically, what we did was we came forward with a lot of ideas. And, at that time, to be truthful, money was really not an issue. And so as long as, it looked like this idea was bringing in a new technology that could be more predictive or innovative, things were moved forward, and millions and millions of dollars were really available to do so. And so the studies back then, were really very often multiple years and large investments, several million at times often. So over time, things became a little bit different, at least for us here at Pfizer. So a lot of the external influence money was less than what we used to have. Actually got smaller and smaller over the years. And that really, made us think about that maybe it's actually time to really think about a strategy. What are our focus areas? And so for us here, of course, one of the priorities was still to, to shift the attrition that we have, such as for liver toxicity or cardiotoxicity. Of course, in vitro and vivo translation is of extreme importance for anybody who works in drug safety. And we still also, of course, had an interest in all the new technologies. And as you know, anything from genomics to today's stem cells, 3D applications, we have seen, many of these, as I call it, sexy topics coming forward over the years. I think also there was a lot of learnings over time when it came to evaluation of technology. And again, there was, in my opinion, a real evolution from where, collaborations were somewhat of a one-way street, and that we certainly didn't want to disclose the compound or what it had attributed for per se. Structures, were taboo, and it wasn't really a true, as I call it, take and give, and where we learned together, where we built something together. But we had a lot of money, and so we could make demands on these companies, for statistical packages, for validation, for screening, for rescreening. Today, we've learned all of this, and so the expectation and have changed, the demands we make on technology vendors of what we actually want to see before they even come to us. So I don't want to take up this entire webinar, so I'll hand it over to Helen. I'm sure we have a lot more ideas as we bounce this back and forward. But yes, it has been an evaluation, to sum it up. It will still be an evaluation. It's also clear that, at least for us, again, we have focused a lot more from external into internal, again, all strategy-driven. So yes, I would say that overall, the environment of science and technology investments and budgets have really, truly changed in the last 10 years. So I'll hand it over to Helen.
Yeah, Yvonne, I would agree with that. I've seen that just in the time that I've been within Amgen, how much that has changed. And just like Yvonne's experience, really, it started out where if it was the quality of the idea, and if it was innovative enough, and if it was, seemed like there was a possibility of it moving attrition, you went forward. And as she said, it would be 3, 4, I've seen 5 years, multi-million-dollar investments in platforms. But what we learned from that was that everybody else was doing the same thing. And it was tremendously inefficient, not just from a resource perspective on our side, just the FTE alone that's required to maintain one of those multi-year, collaborations and evaluations is quite steep on top of the budget that's already allocated to the vendor. And yet we weren't getting, as an industry, much movement. And even though the pipelines between Pfizer and, say, Amgen are very different, Yvonne pulled out liver and cardio. Those are still, as an industry, of very high importance for us and represent the main causes of attrition, not to say that there aren't others. And so we do still tend to focus on those, and really that piece about return on our investment. We don't want to do it over multi-years. We want to see it happen relatively fast. And as Yvonne said, that means that when a vendor comes to us, they already have to have so much pre-work done before we're going to commit, you know, $100,000. You know, it doesn't sound like a lot, I know. Even $100,000, $200,000 to a full, robust evaluation with our internal compounds, they're going to already have to have done a lot of homework before they come to us to really tick off a lot of the boxes. And I think we're going to talk about some of those, what are those boxes later. But they're going to have to have done a lot of pre-work, or we'll just refer them to one of the mini consortia that we're a part of, or, you know, to a venue like this where we can work together in a pre-competitive space to try to get all of that groundwork laid and an early read on the promise of that platform before we will invest now. So it is very different, and I still have companies come who have great ideas, and they have a very small test set, maybe 20 compounds, and of course they're very enthusiastic, and I can see some promise there, but I have to send them back and just say, I'm really sorry, but, you know, 20 is not enough. You know, I actually need a balanced set. When you get to 40 or 50, give me a call. When you have some real numbers, and hey, you can't just use classical toxicants, you actually have to have real pharmaceutical agents in there too. And it's a conversation I have a lot, unfortunately, and so I'm glad that we're here to talk about it with a broader group today to kind of, you know, communicate what those expectations are.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
One other.
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I'm sorry. Helen, something else came to mind, and you know, I never know if I should laugh or cry about this. But you know how when these new technologies come up, we all want to be, you know, of course, doing this. We all want to be the first one because we have so much hope. And what I remember is, you know, that 3 or 4 of us, you know, basically paid the same vendor, and we put almost the same validation compounds in it. So, you know, good for the vendor. They cashed in $500,000 4 times probably, but you know, for us, we realized, you know, it's like we'd all done the same thing. And then when you just said, you know, the compound sets too. So, you know, a long time ago when we started this, we had compound sets, and, you know, we basically knew what we wanted in there, which were reasonably treated, let's call it troglitazone for Pfizer or cerebrostat. You know, today, again, when somebody actually comes and shows me acetaminophen or troglitazone, my conversation is actually over, because we expect today that, you know, yes, that has been shown, and you need to show me what you have that's either, you know, more predictive or costs me less money or gives me more information. So that is another thing that just came to mind. And then, you know, this idea, again, from where we realized, you know, we actually all paid this vendor, to the fact that, you know, if one of us gets stopped by the FDA for some kind of, you know, issue, everybody else is going to be in the same boat. And so it is, you know, it is, as Helen said, it's much less competitive in drug safety than it would be in drug discovery. And that is actually really backed up when you look at publication records. So, you know, when you actually look what has been published out of drug safety departments in large pharma, it is quite impressive, and that's again due to the fact that, you know, we do have common issues, and that, you know, it's all in you know, the hope of patient health and no adverse events, that we can actually exchange some of, you know, the knowledge and the learnings we've had. So I just kind of was thinking about that while Helen was talking.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. I just want to mention, I didn't mention before, if anyone has any questions, just stick them in the chat box to me, and I will interject them to Helen and Yvonne as we're going on, or if I know that they're coming up later in the discussion, we'll hold it off to that point. So please just put your questions in the chat box. So maybe you could give us a little bit more color as to what things were like 10 years ago. I know you've covered that a little bit, but maybe there's a few more points that you each would like to make. So I'll let you guys jump in there and give us your thoughts, Helen and Yvonne.
Well, I think we covered most things pretty well. I mean, I think, you know, we definitely hit on the high points. There was a lot more money. We were more willing to commit. Perhaps we didn't, you know, cooperate quite as much 10 years ago as we do now. Now there's a lot cooperation and working together. And we have just such a higher focus from our management on that return on investment piece that we want to see a lot of de-risking done prior to engaging in any large evaluation. And as Yvonne said, probably if it looks, you know, whichever way it looks, if it looks really good and we're considering doing something, the first thing I'm going to do is probably pick up the phone and ask my colleagues at other companies, you know, hey, have you already tried this? What happened? Because it's just kind of part of how we do our business today. We don't really try to operate alone much anymore.
Yeah, I agree with Helen. I think that's the biggest thing, and it's so funny. Vendors still don't believe that, and you know, when you then finally says, oh, I just called Helen McBride about this, you know, then they actually start, you know, realizing that you're serious, because, you know, that's not what people are used to, that, you know, we really do speak to each other and freely exchange. I think what also has changed a little bit in the last 10 years is how we thought about drug safety in general. I think, you know, when I first came to Pfizer, it was all about there was, you know, some kind of finding in the animal, and then you try to build assays or platforms that could help you find a better compound. You know, I was very fortunate to report to Greg Stevens, who really pioneered the thought of what we call, you know, a drug discovery paradigm, where things actually start much, much earlier. You know, you heard Dawn telling you that I actually spent 6 years in chemistry, and so some of the technologies that we've looked at more recently in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years were more on really building predictivity. And as Helen said, you know, predictivity is not the 20 compounds. Predictivity are, you know, really, really well annotated, very well, you know, annotated data sets of positive and negative compounds, and with statistically relevant, you know, numbers and outputs. So again, there have been some learnings, and so the technologies we have looked at, you know, were certainly a little bit heavy on really getting to that predictivity piece. And the reason why, I mean, I'm pretty sure most people on the call will know that, as we were really trying to find the compound when we had a lot of chemistry going on. When we had other compounds, it's very hard to tell a chemist, you know, after the compound, you know, failed in a rodent study, to say, oh, you know, start all over again when they only have 1 or 2 backups. But, you know, the earlier we engage, the better it is. And so when you think about chemistry and early, you know, there's in silico and there's, you know, higher throughput assays, and much more than later on when you know, start having to look at real seriously mechanistic investigation. So I think what technologies we have evaluated in the last 10 years has, you know, been a little different, and there's definitely a trend towards more predictivity in the, you know, earlier sense of medchem.
Great, thanks very much. And kind of what you're doing is you're framing, you know, how things were 10 years ago, and you know, we're starting to see that things even over the last 10 years have changed a bit. So we have this little picture here of how, you know, today we have a smartphone, and before we used to have a watch and a calculator and a calendar and a radio and an alarm clock and things like that, and now they're all combined into one. So maybe you could give us a little bit more color as well over how you see that things have changed over the years versus what are things like in today's world?
Helen, do you want to give it a stab, or you want me to start?
Sure, yeah, no, I can go for it. I think one of the biggest things is really we have a lot more challenges. So as Yvonne said, it's not just about an in vitro predictive assay that goes into a screening paradigm. I mean, we definitely need those things to get rid of bad actors, but we also need to better represent that translation to in vivo situations. And certainly there's a very big focus, at least at Amgen right now, on really trying to mimic the human as much as possible, because we've gotten really good at de-risking to get us through our preclinical toxicology in vivo studies. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's pretty darn good now. We rarely lose compounds for unexpected toxicities, and by that I mean toxicities that were not defined in some type of target liability assessment. But we continue to be surprised at very expensive phase 2, even phase 1, you know, that's still a shocker to us. But late stage failures, phase 2, phase 3 as an industry, that's really pushed us to think more about, well, how do you model human? So we're obviously not going to be able to do that with standard cell lines. We've tried that. It hasn't been very helpful. Even, say, primary human hepatocytes or cardiomyocytes have their limitations because of length of culture time. So we really shifted towards, well, how can we model the human, but in a way that's compatible, that gives us throughput, et cetera. So that focus, though, has complicated matters because we still need throughput, and yet somehow we have to model the human better. So it's pushed us towards doing a lot more interesting collaborations, so with academics in particular. Those are fraught with peril, as anyone who does them will tell you, both from a, you know, just time to an agreement piece, as well as, you know, actually getting them to deliver on what was promised. So we still prefer to work with companies, but we'll often do a three-way type of thing now, where we'll still have academic advisors, or they'll, actually the technology companies will often have these academic advisors where the technology spun out of their lab, and we'll end up in these very complicated kind of three-way agreements. And at least in Amgen, we don't have the alliance management capability to support that type of work. So it is very intensive, which is why I now have a dedicated role to do that, because it was really pulling on a lot of different people's time. So it's definitely changed a lot, and I would say that groups that bring multiple companies together where we can get things done more efficiently are really helpful and preferred, because everybody comes to the table with their company's perspective and interest. It helps us all learn from each other. And things tend to go faster when you have somebody in between to do that facilitation, to call those meetings, to keep everyone accountable and engaged. It just really is much more efficient than each group trying to do it by itself. So that looks really different than it did in the past.
Sorry, great. Thanks, Helen. That was terrific. So, Yvonne, do you want to jump in and give us a bit of your perspective on how things have changed over the years versus today's world?
Yeah, I think, you know, Helen really covered it nicely, you know, just to kind of add on a little bit to, you know, the success of these consortia. I remember, you know, when I joined the DSEC, I wasn't in the position I was today, and you know, Ernie Bush was our project manager, and I was just always enamored, and I thought, God, there's so much to learn. Why can't we do this? You know, because I just felt like, you know, there was so much experience of, as Helen said, to keep these things on track, but also really define the outcomes, you know, and I realized that I think that's a thing that has changed too. You know, most of the time scientists are trained to ask a scientific question, a curious question, but when I very often ask scientists, so what is your product, and who's your customer, and how will you implement it? It's very difficult, and I learned a lot in this consortium of, you know, how do you really define what your outcome of this project is? What is truly the question you want to answer? And you know, really stick with that piece and work towards it. And then, again, as Helen said, you know, if for the most part we have been very successful to really put the right subject matters onto this, and so you know, the projects have greatly benefited from what I call two heads think better than one, and it's actually usually more like 14 heads. So I think, you know, as Helen said, bringing perspective, bringing experience, really the subject matter expertise to these projects in a concerted effort, you can't beat that. You can't beat that. You know, because within a company, usually most of us can finish somewhat each other's thought process, and getting that diversity of thought process is very provoking at times, but it always, you know, there's no doubt has made the science better.
So maybe just another question for both of you, if you feel there's anything that you haven't covered, but in today's world, in what you're looking at in the pharmaceutical industry, what would you say are some of the things that are really different than they were 10 years ago? Is there anything else that you haven't addressed yet so far that you think would be really helpful to the audience listening today to say, hey, today's dreams or today's situation is totally different than it was 10 years ago? Or do you think you've covered everything? I just want to make sure before we go on.
Yeah, I think I stick with the iPhone.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think we covered it.
Okay, good.
So some of it might come out later in the discussions as people might, have some particular questions. So hopefully, we'll have something else to add. As you can tell,
Okay.
both Helen and I are pretty passionate about it. And I think, even though things are more demanding, more difficult, more restricted, in some twisted way, we're asking the better questions. And I think we're taking, maybe that's a big difference. This is not a scientific project anymore for scientists like it was 10 years ago. This is a serious business deliverable with metrics and accountability. That, I would say, is probably the biggest difference that we have. It's a business, right? The product.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. That is very different, and I'm not so sure that people who've been along for that crazy ride on the technology side have appreciated that. Perhaps they do when they have candid conversations with us, but it really does change what we're looking for, and thus what we're going to invest in.
And it's not, it's not natural, I think, for scientists per se. So for me, where I sit in a strategic role, I am accountable at the end of how did you spend the money and what did you bring back for me? What are the products you've launched, right? And there's even words used like that. So I don't even remember the word product, customer, and metrics be part of my scientific upbringing in the first years at Pfizer. I probably would have walked out, not even knowing what the hell they were talking about. So I think that is very, very different, that we actually are treating science as a business to deliver products.
Okay, great. So the next thing that we were going to talk about in the presentation today is just, thinking back to 10 years ago and why what was then called the Drug Safety Executive Council, why it was originally formed, and just thinking about, what were some of the needs there. Is there anything that you haven't covered already that you see a consortium can help with that would be important to highlight to today's audience?
So actually, I'm going to continue with your evolution in 10 years. So I have been on the DSEC probably now for 6 years, probably at least. And I think the DSEC has undergone an evolution as well in how we look at the vendors, what questions we're asking. Back to what I just said, the compound sense, the product, the application, the customer, the return of investment. I would say that in our first, projects, we were still somewhat asking more of a scientific question, But I would say that we have gotten, so much more stringent the way we engage with the vendors, the expectations we have, and the demand on knowledge when they come to us. We expect them to really be well-versed in drug safety and not come to us with something that they developed and they thought, well, it didn't work so well for, for neuroscience. Let's try the DSEC folks, So I would say the DSEC itself, has really undergone a huge learning and curve. Well, I shouldn't call it a learning curve. We really advanced into taking a much more business approach to this as well. So I can see the changes in there that have really been, what's the right word, trailing along or complementing the changes that Helen and I described for pharma. So the DSEC has adapted to the change in pharma that's going on.
Great,
Does
thanks.
that make
Helen, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would say that piece, it amazes me how many vendors still come, and Ivana pointed out, you know, we used to be much more demanding. We had the cash. It was very much a one-way type of flow. Even younger technology companies, I find, still there's kind of this awkward dance in the beginning of, you know, well, how do I work with you? Are you a collaborative group at Amgen, or are you one of these, hey, do it my way, deliver this right away? And I think the DSEC really helps because there's this intermediary which is providing this collaborative, clear set of expectations across companies. So it just makes it a very easy way to interact because it's going to be very consistent. So even though the players change and who sits at the table changes for any particular evaluation, what you see from you know, the DSEC side will be consistent. I think that's very helpful. But what we can also offer is that I still do have companies come who really don't get that, I call it Assay 101 type of approach, where it's just very basic first principles of what's required in an assay depending on how we're going to use it. And I find myself explaining this almost on a weekly basis to one company or another, and really trying to pull out from them, well, where do you think your assay fits? You know, just to see, do they understand even what we do? Or as Yvonne said, are they kind of shopping it around, oh, you know, let's go try the safety folks. Because I'm going to be more engaged and more interested if they've really thought or actually designed something specifically for safety rather than trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole. Because right off the bat, I know, man, I'm going to have to invest a lot of time in this person just to get them up to the expectation level so I can even work with them. So I love the idea that the DSEC sits in between and really is a place where you can kind of get that in a one-stop shop and can be much more efficient.
Great, thanks for that. That's really helpful. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening in today, they really want to know, you know, what you guys, if you don't have the money that you used to have, what can you offer them from the perspective of helping them be successful in bringing you something that you really want? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And Helen, do you want to go first, and then we can turn it over to Yvonne?
Yeah, sure. We can definitely offer, and I've done this for partners before, simple things like making sure that when they give us deliverables, when they give us reports, that it's in a format that is acceptable to industry. I've done a lot of editing on, you know, draft reports from companies, really trying to reorganize things, trying to show them what's really needed in terms of putting in the details, because they don't appreciate that those things get filed. As Yvonne said, we're accountable. We need to document what we did. We need to document outcomes, not just that day, but for the future, so that when someone comes back 2 years later and wants to reevaluate, they have that information intact and it's in a repository somewhere so someone can go back and review. That means it needs to be very complete and in a format that is acceptable to us. It has to have a lot of background, a lot of information in it, context. So we'll tell you that we can tell them how we need to receive things. I think that's helpful. We can also give them ideas. Maybe they were pushing in a certain direction, and we say, hey, you know, actually, I think this might be a little bit better fit. Or we'll actually pull out, because we see so many options, how they differentiate themselves from someone else. Organs on a chip is a great example, I think, where we see everybody. And so we know very clearly, to our mind, how each company differentiates, what its strengths and its weaknesses are. We can be very candid about that. And I think that helps them long term. You know, they want to work on those weaknesses, or they want to play to their strengths, that's up to them. But we can at least tell them, hey, this is how we're thinking about you and your product. I think that can be very helpful for them. And we have the compounds. as Yvonne said, we don't want to see acetaminophen. Nobody wants to see acetaminophen. Nobody wants to see troclitazone anymore. We can give you modern pharmaceuticals which have very specific properties, and these things are pretty darn clean. Remember, if we had a failure or we had a surprise, it's because it's not something that another assay could take care of. We can give them really, I think, the best advantage to differentiate how their assay is going to add value by using very selective, high-quality compounds that they just can't get anywhere else, and diverse chemistries if they leverage a consortia approach across companies. So I think that is a huge value. When I work with academic partners, that's the thing that they come back to over and over again and say, oh my gosh, just you gave me, 5 mg of this compound and, or a set of like 20 of these compounds, and it's just completely changed how I can do my work and develop my assays now. So I think we have a lot to offer. I love it when companies are open to hearing it. Not everybody is, but I guess people who come to the consortia, place like DSEC, would be the ones who are, right off the bat going to really want that feedback from us.
Great, thanks so much. That was terrific. Yvonne, do you want to add to that? What else do you think the industry has to offer?
Helen really summed it up very nicely. I don't think I really truly have something to add per se. I think what I was just actually thinking, maybe one of the things that we should be doing next in the consortium is maybe really work on a roadmap that we can provide to vendors, from the get-go, because I agree with Helen. We have a lot to offer, and I'm very, very open with feedback and everything, but I do feel very often I'm really just always educating and somewhat, wasting a little bit of my time, and that comes with, an hour webinar they've scheduled for you, and they've made it to slide 8 at 55 minutes, and that's kind of standard. And again, the way they bring it to you as a business case, it's still mostly around, science. So I think what we do is we provide a lot of guidance, but maybe, we need to now shift from us mentoring, from the start to having some guidance put out before that will help them to actually get ready for these type of conversations, or, deciding if that's what they really want to have, is that relationship and that conversation. I think what we do offer, as Helen said, is, an enormous amount of knowledge, and not just within drug safety. We know about chemistry, we know about PK/PD. We've seen it all, and if not us, if I haven't seen it, then, somebody at Jensen has seen it. So again, we have a lot of power. There's nothing we haven't seen altogether, But maybe, it's time to go ahead and start, taking our experience from the last 10 years and provide some roadmaps right from the get-go.
That's great. That's a great idea. So just turning it maybe to the flip side of it is, do you guys have any thoughts about how the industry benefits from working in a consortia? And this little thing up here says, we need to work together to get there. So it's kind of cute. And then I do have some questions that are starting to come in, so I'll get to those in a few minutes. We have the roadmap that you guys have thought about, but maybe you can just think about this question here. How does the industry benefit from working in a consortia?
I think I'm going to start answering this real simple for you. We're all still there. So, when people show up for a meeting, when people stick for it for several years, they must be getting something out of it. I think, it's a variety of things. Again, we validate, and so we can implement if we see value, but we also, can very quickly, again, due to, fantastic project management and us all sitting at the table, very quickly, make go, no-go decisions on technologies. It's an opportunity to look into something that I maybe wouldn't invest on it on my own, because it's not per se the highest priority on my strategy for the little bit of money I have. But here I have an opportunity to branch out of my comfort zone. So maybe I'm not somebody who usually gets overly engaged in QSAR models, but here maybe I will take the opportunity and say, maybe that's something I need to explore. So let's learn, let's listen to others, let's participate. I think, there's a lot of different avenues you can think of, including, you know, what I call lovingly competitive intelligence, you know. So not in a competitive way, but I want to know what Helen thinks about them. You know, I want an honest answer from others who have worked with somebody or suggested somebody. So I see a lot of advantages, and when you look at the consortia, most of us have really quite a history with it, and maybe representatives have, you know, changed on the steering committees, but company participation is still there, and I think that tells the story right there.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Yvonne. And over to you, Helen.
Yeah, I think that the competitive intelligence piece is a big part of it, because it goes around those chemistries. Because the first question I'm going to get asked after profiling our compounds is, that's great, but this is our chemistry and things are always changing, adapting. How well does that model predict, or how well does that model recapitulate toxicity for other types of chemistries? The only way I'm going to get that with sort of up-to-date compounds is if we have a consortia approach, and other companies brought their compounds with them as well. It's like a big cookie swap. Okay, so we get to see a lot of information very quickly and say, wow, you know, it was really good for Pfizer's compounds. You know, Takeda's did okay. Our chemistry didn't perform as well. I wonder why. And as publications come out, you can start to do detective work to figure it out. But it's really good to know, as people sit around that table, it's like, well, how well did this work across, you know, what different folks are working on and having different challenges in? Because that's helpful, because we're always changing and we don't know where we're going next. So it can't just be good enough for what we do today. It really needs to have a broader perspective, and that's what we get from participating.
Great, thanks so much. Just threw in this one chart here. I thought people would be interested in it. And this is a survey we did back in 2014 asking pharmaceutical and biotech companies, what were your key concerns in adopting that technology for the first time for your organization? And the number one thing that everybody reported back was that they really wanted the technology to be validated. And I think that's the strength of what you guys have provided over the years, is really giving some great, honest, true, real-world, roll-up-your-sleeves feedback to things to help people move forward and understand what was really important to you guys in the industry. So kudos to you as well for making that happen. The next thing that really we talked about that you were going to provide was really a roadmap to move forward. So Yvonne, I think you talked about a logistical roadmap, but today we're going to talk about a scientific roadmap on how to move forward. So is there anything that you want to talk about on that from a global perspective before I actually have you share some of your ideas, your specific ideas?
No, I think I'm good. I think you can move forward if you like.
Okay. So the first thing that you wanted to talk about was the importance of centralizing technology evaluations and sort of offering up the fact that we really need to do this even more so, given, you know, that we had tons of money 10 years ago and we don't have that tons of money anymore. So maybe you can just talk a little bit about why you think it's important to have a new industry direction and mandate to more comprehensively centralize technology evaluation.
Yeah, I just think it's almost a necessity. I mean, we're already doing it, but basically, if, you know, we could come to somewhat of an agreement in pharma of saying somebody knocks on your door, you know, let's send them over to 1 Million Solution. We look at it as a consortia because, as Helen said, you know, that's what happens, right? They call you, and then, you know, you send them to the next, and they go to the next, and, you know, about 6 months later, we've all seen them. We've all seen their slide decks. And again, you know, I don't think we need to per se rehash this, but just, you know, the fact that we have the compounds, the fact that we have all this knowledge, all this experience, we have in vitro and in vivo, you know, correlation abilities that nobody else has. So I think it only makes sense, and I think it's a necessity from where budgets are and the demand on technology we have today. I think, you know, we could really benefit from just sending everybody over to you. We'll look at it together. We'll make some decisions. We'll give them feedback. And that's the other thing, too, that they would get, you know, the feedback from all of us together because, you know, last week I had somebody here and I gave them my advice, and then I'll send them over to Helen and she adds something to it. They could have gotten that a lot faster, you know, than moving from from me to Abbott to Janssen to Novartis.
Great, makes sense. And for you, Helen, what are your thoughts?
I think Yvonne really summed it up, because we've touched on a lot of these themes throughout the whole time, and I know we're getting close to the hour, and I wanted to hear what some of those questions were.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well, we'll turn it over to the last thing that you guys wanted to cover. You wanted to give everyone a sort of a drug safety roadmap. So here's what you talked about when we had our pre-discussions. Can you just share with everyone your thoughts on why these items here are important, and maybe since there's about 7 or 8 of them, maybe one of you, if you want to start with the first 3, and then the other person can handle the last 3 or something like that. So Yvonne, do you want to start?
I'm going to start, and I'm not quite sure that we really need to do this. I think we talked a lot about evolution and what's needed today, and what's on here is a reflection of what is needed today. What are people thinking? What are the expectations? So, I mean, we can run probably a couple minutes late, but I think that is really, you know, that is the vocabulary of 2015, 2016. So if we would get back together 5 years from now, we would probably talk about what has it delivered, where are the gaps. I think, you know, science and drug safety will unfortunately always be an evolution as drug targets get more complicated, chemistry, you know, runs out of patents, I don't know. I don't think, you know, personally, and I hope, you know, Tim Anderson is not listening right now, I don't think we're ever going to solve everything. You know, we might get cheaper and faster and more predictive. We're not going to solve everything. So I think this will always be an evolution. So what you see there is today and the next 3 years, and when Helen and I come back or somebody else, you know, you will see an evolution of the slide. At least that's what I hope.
Great, okay, thank you. Helen, do you want to comment on this at all?
No, I agree. I think it'll be different, and what you see here, we can talk about if someone has a specific question, but it really just reflects where we're going and adopting a lot of the same practices that folks have been using from the efficacy side of things, and thinking about really partitioning populations based on, in their case, responders, and in our case, risk, to really try to optimize that benefit over the risk for any particular patient.
Okay, great. Well, the next slide actually fits with some of the questions, so I'm going to put this slide up here but ask you some of the questions that have come in. One here is, what is needed from companies to make a project successful, and are there standard formats that the industry requires?
Yeah, I think you brought it up earlier. I think we have lots of learnings and recommendations we can give them, but, you know, maybe it is something that this consortium should take on to really provide a guidance document that, you know, can be broadly applicable to vendors. As, you know, Helen said earlier, and, you know, we can give them demands on statistics and reproducibility and this and the other thing, and compounds, but, you know, maybe there is something we can put together that makes it standardized even, you know, or just easier for folks.
Yeah, generally we like to have something in every company has a slightly different report format that we use, but the different sections are pretty similar. And as Yvonne said, just sort of a kind of a general guidance, and so I'm sure we could pull that together, something that's more homogeneous across companies, that still fulfills what we're really looking for that, you know, archiving piece.
Okay, great, thanks. So here's another couple questions that relate to the same slide. So what moves these projects along in a timely fashion? And related to that would be, have you internalized any of the technologies? Have you onboarded them? Have you purchased the services afterwards? That type of question.
So we have.
Yeah.
We have, definitely, and we've actually leveraged them, some of them actually even outside of drug safety, because I said some of the technologies that might be applicable much more broadly. Sometimes we actually participate especially in the beginning, it's something that we were already involved with, and that they just gave us more confidence that we were on the right path, and, you know, basically a reconfirmation of what we hoped, you know, to get out of it, or what we thought we had gotten out of it. So different, you know, different depending on the project.
We have as well at Amgen, we do try to not bring things in. We do like to use it on a fee-for-service or a, you know, a contract basis as much as possible, because, you know, unless it's something that is really going to change our paradigm. Most of that work does get done inside if it's an early screening assay. So I haven't seen us internalize the technology to, you know, radically change what we do. What I have seen is us leveraging those technologies where they fit that niche, where they really have their strengths. We do that on an as-needed basis, usually for a particular program that's dealing with an issue that their technology addresses.
You know what, you're right, Helen. I need to take back the word internalize. I should probably say, you know, we utilize the technologies. You're right. We didn't per se bring them in. We just, you know, made use of them. But you're right, mostly with the vendor in an outside collaboration.
Great. So when they're doing the project for you or with you, you know, in a collaborative consortium fashion, what have you found helps move the project along in a timely fashion? Like, what advice could you give to the vendors to help make sure that projects get moved along quickly and successfully?
So one of the things that I have noticed, especially with smaller biotechs, you know, they're sometimes not ready to really engage with industry because they have developed a very complex model, and suddenly they're supposed to look at reproducibility and at, you know, those response curves and you know, 100 compounds or even 20 compounds, and they're just not set up to really cater towards industry. And I see that, again, when they go around and try to engage everybody, and, you know, they say, and then 3 or 4 pharma actually do get engaged, and then they can't deliver on it. So I think, you know, companies need to realize what it actually is that they're really signing up for, and, you know, can they do that? Are they set up for it? Because, you know, an investigative type laboratory building a model or something different than, you know, putting that into production mode. So again, you know, industry can provide guidance, but usually we don't provide the guidance till we have signed up for it. But that's something to, you know, very important.
Yeah,
okay.
I would echo that. I would say, just to extend on a little bit, that what I see is they do have this very early technology in many cases, and they're used to talking to early adopter types. That would be people like Yvonne and I, who love technology and love to talk about the science with them. But as you heard, we also have to think about the business piece. And so that shift from that early adopter conversation to really dealing with folks who are going to mainstream or utilize the technology more broadly is a big one. And I think companies need to be aware of that, you know, that, and that they have to have very different information to engage those different folks. And if we want to be credible internally and go to bat for that technology and say, hey, I think that we should give this a shot, I think that we should utilize this for this particular program, then they need to help give us the information that we're going to need to get there. And so they need to ask questions. They need to be open with us and really take our feedback. A lot of times I see this resistance, you know, they don't want to take the feedback, and a year later they come back and say, yeah, I wish I really had taken that feedback. So just having that openness and realizing that, you know, it's not always going to be just the fun and the science, that we do have to wear a business hat.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you both for that. That's terrific. This is a really interesting question, because the question is, why should a technology company participate in an evaluation if they already work with pharma customers? And I've had this asked to me sort of a little bit differently, but the point is, like, I'm a big company. I already have salespeople out there. I already know Yvonne. I already know Helen. Why should I go through and have my project go through the consortium approach to have my technology evaluated? So that's kind of how I often have it asked to me. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, knowing me and working with me are two different things. So I wouldn't doubt that they know me or have talked to me, but that doesn't mean they've worked with me. I think the difference still is, and Helen pointed this out earlier as well, is when you go to the consortium and there's 12 to 14 large farmers standing behind, right, that will come out with a publication, for example, you can look it up, and I'm not telling a secret, Metabolomics, that really speaks for your company. That will give you incredible, what's the word, help me out, I'm getting, it gives, you know, people a lot of
credibility?
Credibility, yeah.
Thank you, that's the word I needed, darn aliens. Yes, credibility. There's a lot of credibility behind this, and you get it in a very timely fashion. So, I mean, I would, you know, say with vendors that have been around forever and ever and ever, you know, maybe Sarah, you know, doesn't really need to do that anymore, but especially when it comes to what was on your last slide, you know, what the areas are that are important to us right now. I think, you know, that the credibility from the consortia of saying, yes, that worked, and again, being able to get that input, it's got to be of value.
I'll give a great example because I was just at the APT meeting last week, and a fairly established company had an evaluation given in a presentation by one of my colleagues at another company, and a beautiful evaluation. And you know what happened, though? It was just that one person's interpretation and how it fit into their framework. And you miss out on that then because, hey, maybe I thought that it had a lot more value than that person did, or maybe Yvonne did. Well, we talk about it openly then, and we come to some type of consensus. Now, when you go piecemeal like that, even if it gets presented at a conference, it just causes more churn about it. Because now we're all going to be calling each other on the phone like, hey, what did you think about that? Oh, I don't know, that compound list, that's quite not the one I would pick. And so it's just much more efficient to, you know, even when you're engaged with those folks and they just drop 250 grand on you, it serves you better in the long run to just have it be open where you hear that feedback instead of us all calling on each other on the phone where the company doesn't hear any of it. And I do apologize, I have to run to another meeting.
Great. Well, I know you both are very busy, so I'm going to stop the questions, but I do have 2 or 3 more slides I just want to share with the audience if they want to cover next steps. But in the meantime, I'll let Helen and Yvonne go because, as you can tell, working in a biopharmaceutical company, you've got back-to-back meetings, and they've already graced us with an extra 7 minutes of their time. So thank you both for terrific presentations and discussions today, and I'm sure we'll have lots of follow-up questions and people who want to know more. So I'll let you guys run and say thanks again, but if the rest of you could just stick on for 2 more minutes, I'm just going to show you a few more slides. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, so just real quick here, just want to let you know how you can get involved and move forward. So there is a technology evaluation consortium roadmap as well. You saw that graph which was going up exponentially before. We have really aggressive plans, particularly with bringing on, you know, having looked at over 100 technologies through our open call for innovation, and also now with our partnership with the NIH, we're really trying to more aggressively help out the whole industry and accelerate the adoption. So this is sort of a call. If you're on the line and you're from a biotech or pharmaceutical company, we would like you to add into the list I shared with you a few minutes ago about pangenetics and all those other areas. I'll just go back there for a second. But this list here, if you have other things that you think should be on the roadmap for the Technology Evaluation Consortium to look at in the area of drug safety and toxicology, please let us know. If you're a vendor and you would like to add some things that you think we should be looking at, again, please let us know that as well. We have, as I've indicated, more and more evaluations and validations planned over the next while. And if you weren't part of our original open call and you'd like to be considered to be evaluated by the Technology Evaluation Consortium, again, please do let us know. We do the evaluations, as I said before, through the Signature Square process, and we do our validations through the TEC Validation Project. That one takes about 6 months. A signature square takes fundamentally one webinar where we get you feedback and we get you rated and ranked by the industry, but they don't actually get to try you out in the signature square. As I mentioned before, we publish results and we share the findings. And we're, as I said, we have a new partnership with the NIH. We're also looking towards working with other countries around the world and their comparable organizations to the NIH in order to accelerate the movement of technology from academia to commercialization. You saw in the beginning of this presentation all those cities around the world. That's just the tip of the iceberg of the cities that are involved in trying to push biotech in pharmaceutical area and try to make things more successful across the board. And we're also looking, as Yvonne and Helen mentioned numerous times during the presentation today, that this is an expensive endeavor. So we're looking to collaborate more with organizations to help co-fund the projects, to help accelerate the opportunities to apply for grants as teams, as partners in all this. So we recognize that everyone is short of cash, but we all have great science, and we want to find some unique ways to make that happen for everyone. So really our mission at the Technology Evaluation Consortium, as we've evolved to this point at our 10-year anniversary, is to be the place for the industry to conduct their evaluations and validations, and to help triage and streamline the new technology considerations for the industry. So this is what our goal is, our vision, our mission, and our how we want to help everyone accomplish more with less. So here's some contact information for myself. You can check out our website at 1millionsolutionsinhealth.org. You can email me directly right there. And fundamentally, if you do have any other questions or things that you want to learn about, please just send me an email as well. We really, again, thank very much Yvonne and Helen for their time today in presenting their thoughts and in answering the questions that were provided. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do is make everyone more successful. It's extremely frustrating when we know we have great science. I'm just going to go back to this one slide here. And we don't have a way to get it out there and get it utilized as fast as it possibly can be. So we really see ourselves as like an incubator and an accelerator, sort of an honest broker to have the evaluation be done in the most efficient and effective way. And we would love to partner with everyone on both sides of the table, whether you're a technology provider or you're a technology user, and help you accelerate things. So if there's any other last questions, we'd be more than pleased to take them. There is a survey that was put up into our chat box, and we would love you to fill out the survey. It will take you, I think it's like very, very short, mostly tick boxes. We'd love to get your feedback on this presentation, also on what you'd like to see for future presentations. And if you missed any part of this, we will send out a recording to everyone who registered, but also feel free to share this with your colleagues around the world because this is our mandate. We've just kicked off with our new organization, 1 Million Solutions in Health, bringing over the Technology Evaluation Consortium, which we've been working on together for the last 10 years. And we see a great future working with the scientists and the great technologies to make them successful across the board. So again, thank you today for everyone's attendance. We certainly appreciate it. And engage, connect, collaborate, learn and share, do all those things we talked about in the beginning, and I think we'll all get there. Thanks again and have a great day. Take care now.